the recording. All right, folks, welcome to TMFA Community Office Hours on Wednesday, December 30th. We're here with Rob Petrozzo. For the last 15 years, he's been in the product design space. He's held roles developing and designing brands and digital offerings for the folks like Kanye West, Johnson & Johnson, the NFL, Citi, and Fortune 500 companies across 12 countries. Rob is now co-founder and chief product officer over at Rally. Rally is an app-based stock exchange for buying and selling equity in ultra-rare assets with a history of strong returns like classic cars, Babe-Ruth's home run bat, first edition Harry Potter books. Basically, Rally turns collectibles, an over $200 billion a year industry, into stocks that anyone can trade. So each week, Rally takes a tangible item public through an SEC-registered IPO, and then has created a community for the trading of these assets through an active secondary market, all happening inside of an app. Did I miss anything, Rob?
No, I mean, it sounds really complex, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really a marketplace for bringing these really incredible, many times one-of-one collectibles to the people that care about the most and letting them really own equity in it start to finish, and all that happens in the app. So that was a super concise start to finish, man. That's better than most of my pitches. So,
well, you sent it to me verbatim, so I just read it with a little bit of enthusiasm.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think it was the enthusiasm that went with it that went a long way further than mine does, for sure.
So I first found out about Rally. I was walking around Soho, and then I saw a Lamborghini Countach for sale as a fractional item inside of your storefront in Soho. Maybe you could just give us a little bit of a history of Rally and where the business is now. I know you just raised a big round. Like, when did this start? How has it grown? Where are you taking it?
Yeah, so I'll give you the full rundown in like 2 minutes. So we, myself and my two partners, Max and Chris, we've known each other for a while. And I was sort of like the designer, and I went to art school, and I got out, and it was 2007, 2008. Everything was like brand new, but the iPhone had just come out. So everything that was considered art was now starting to go digital. And the idea that all these esoteric items, these things from the past, were going to be important. And the way I saw it and the way we saw it was they'd be increasingly important as we went digital, and as the analog stuff that had this nostalgia and had this rarity and was really made by hand, it wasn't going to go away. We felt like it would be more prevalent. So we thought in our heads like this, the value of these items are going to go up. It's already happened. Classic cars was the first sort of iteration. It was something that for me, from a design standpoint, I've always been super into. My partners, Chris and Max. Max is from Germany, so like Porsche is like religion over there. And Chris was somebody who really understood cars and had this aspirational knowledge and love for this asset class. But the good stuff, we realized, we started doing the research, had gotten crazy expensive. And it was something that was outpacing everything. So to own the stuff you cared about was tough. The only choice, if you have like $5,000, $10,000 to spend, you can get an old Porsche and it looks awesome, but it requires crazy maintenance, and it's not something that necessarily goes to like shows. It's something that you beat up and you drive. But we always thought there's a way to have that complemented by something in your portfolio where it's the museum quality piece. It's something that should be shown off. And if we can make that happen the same way that a lot of startups are starting to raise money, and the way that sort of the Jobs Act had come out in like 2012, 2013, 2014, which was made for like Kickstarter and all these people that were putting money into crowdfunding, we felt like there was a way to leverage that. So we started talking to, a bunch of friends who kind of understood it a little bit and trying to get their feedback. And we were trying to put the pitch together to go talk to lawyers and figure out what we needed to do with the government and the SEC and all the regulatory bodies. And, we all had jobs at the time, but we put our heads down and started working on it. And then like 2015, 2016, end of 2016 came around, and we had like the idea of a product on paper, basically. So then it was just start building. And that was kind of what turned into the demo of the product. We showed it to a bunch of people that we had like 1 degree of separation away from in finance. And they were like, this could be something, but we're not sure. We'll give you a little bit of money to try it out. So we raised a small round in like end of 2016, a couple $100,000 from like small checks from people, sort of that friends and family type of round. We didn't actually get money from friends and family. We were worried this wasn't going to work at first. Like we were like, we're going to build this out and see where it goes. But we weren't thinking about it as like a cash grab at all. We were like, let's talk to people who really understand this business and understand finance, because we don't necessarily know all the ins and outs, and try and get that smart money involved in the company early. And then we just kept building. And now, 4 years later, we always had big ambitions for this company to have our own museums, the one that you walked into, and to be able to sort of show off these items and be able to tell the story more effectively than just Googling it. And we always want to make it really a true equity where you can have actual ownership. So over the course of the last 4 years, from that point forward, it was just heads down, building out the platform, trying to acquire as many assets as possible. And now we look down and it's a big team, and we raise a bunch of money, and we have, hundreds of thousands of users in the app, and people that really now are our community that we built is kind of informing us on what direction to go in. So it started with cars, but then we started hearing like, this would be great for baseball cards. It would be great for vintage literature. It'd be great for wine. And we started, having those conversations. And then it became, once we started getting that in the platform, now we're at a point that yesterday we put a dinosaur into the app. We put a Triceratops fossil, fully fossilized Triceratops in the app. Because that was something where it's like, man, this would be cool. That's becoming like a weird thing. Museums are closed right now. What if we take vintage technology, the original Apple products? What if we take dinosaurs? Those are all investment worthy asset classes to a super, super small group of people who have the means, the money, and the access. So we're always trying to find the best possible stuff that evokes the most emotion, that truly is art too. The way we've always looked at it is that all of this is art to somebody. And we know that activating those, what are essentially like small niche groups, we're bringing all of it to the platform en masse because we're trying to find the best stuff that's going to trigger their emotion and get them involved. So that's the last 4 years, really heads down, trying to build out the best product that makes it as easy as possible and hides all that complexity that you talked about early on, and also brings to light ownership in these crazy one-of-one assets that have shown really great appreciation over time as well. And now, that's the first iteration. The next iteration is trying to take that small museum concept and go global with it and be able to sort of create a lane for big museums, institutions to create some real engagement in a time like this where it's tough to go to a museum, but also be able to monetize the collection a little bit and put some money in the bottom line.
So you guys aren't currently selling art on the platform. Is that something that you see on the roadmap, or is there a reason why you're not selling art as an asset on the platform?
Yeah, I mean, it always has been on the roadmap. I'll be honest, the way we've always looked at it is that we want to have domain expertise before we go into any asset class. And art is this thing it's super close to my heart, and it's something that I care almost too much about. And I've been my collection, like I'll say, I've always been very a little bit self-conscious of like showing it off. It's something that I keep by myself, tucked away. It's in my house, or it's in my parents' attic. I have some stuff, but the emotional connection to art is very specific, and it's one that we don't want to ever go into a space and tiptoe into. We want to kind of kick the door down and make a big scene a little bit, but we don't. That construct, as you know, the gallery construct and the opacity that goes with the art market is so specific, and they really like the way that it is right now. So for us to go into a space like that and make a splash, we've tiptoed into it a little bit. We started having the conversations a bunch over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's a natural progression for us. But when it comes to fine art, it's a fight that we don't necessarily want to have yet, I think is the only way I can kind of put it. But it's something that 100% is on the roadmap. And we've had really in-depth, very close to closing conversations on the stuff that everybody would recognize, the stuff that I care about from the 80s and 90s, and these living abstract expressionists who really want to sort of go to our marketplace and are okay with it. But it's also something that the opacity that lives in that space right now, the gallery owners, the representation, everybody's really comfy with the way that works. We're not ready to go in and create a scene yet, if that kind of makes sense.
Totally. Any items on the platform that you've personally invested in? What does your portfolio look like? You said you keep it close to your chest, but I imagine you've got some shares of Countach's and stuff.
So, I mean, that's one that we're legally not allowed to invest on the platform. So for me, I have a lot of stuff that's very similar. None of it's a one-to-one, but when it comes to like, it's weird because the stuff that I've made the best returns on in terms of investments, it's been art, but it's been things that I think are real. Like anybody who looks at art and from a gallery construct and looks at it and says, that's investment worthy, or that's where you should put your money. I've always been of the buy what you like, and if it makes money, it makes money construct. Like that concept to me is what's always made sense. It's worked a bunch. Sometimes it hasn't. So my collection of like art, it's everything from like, it's CJ Henry, and it's Joseph Lee, and it's some of the artists that do things I can't, but they're very much Instagram friendly. But it's also the people that I just really respect. It's like Steve Powers, and I have a bunch of his sketchbook pages. But it's also like lesser known artists like Chad Pierce, who I think is super talented, but I don't necessarily look at that as an investment. I just love what he does. The living artists, like, I've started trying to get into like Peter Saul and some people that are way out of my price point, but at the same time, I can get a small piece. But I also have like the best investment I ever made was a Goya etching, which makes no sense relative to the rest of that collection. So that's the stuff that I look at and I want it. And I look at it and I say, like, if I could put some money aside and get this and put it in a collection, I have a feeling it's going to make some money, but I'm not looking at it like that. I've always looked at buy what you love. If it makes money, that's great. And that goes for everything. So everything that's on the platform, I have some investment that's close to it, or I own something that's very close to it, but none of it's that one for one. The majority of my new money is in vintage video games that are sealed. Actually, that's where I've been suggesting others put money. But that's also, none of this is investment advice, just for the record too.
Yeah.
Everything can go to zero. Anything on rally can go to zero. Any investment can go to zero. I got to put that out there quick. I'm gonna get in trouble.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
This is not investment advice. I am not a lawyer. All that stuff.
Neither am I. Yes.
And do you have any success stories of folks that are like making a living off of investing and trading on Rally Road?
So we always communicate with all of our entire user base, and there's still people that came in 4 years ago that are still on the platform right now, and they're like, they have my cell phone number. Like, I give it out my phone number to so many people, and we have conversations about what they like and how they're making money. And they've been really open with posting on Twitter and on Instagram and social media what their returns look like. So what we've seen is that people that came in with with no sort of set in stone investment thesis, and they've allowed themselves to diversify, have done well. So someone might come in for, a Michael Jordan rookie card, let's say, but then you start looking around and you realize like the '85 Ferrari Testarossa was like Michael Jordan's favorite car. And that's something that, we have two really incredible examples of that Testarossa, and they'll put some money in there too. Then they start looking at the time frame of the '80s and they see some of the stuff that it hasn't gotten the same attention maybe as Michael Jordan, but it's from that same era, has that same feel. They'll put some money in there. Then the way we've looked at it is that over time, these assets historically have outperformed the regular market. It's not to say it'll keep happening in the future, but if people come in, they're open to new opportunities. We try and put as much information out there as possible to make sure that every single price comp, why something's important, what the history of it is, the provenance, who owned it before us, and everything that goes with it, so you can make an informed decision. So people that come in and tend to sort of diversify based on like a broad thesis, and it might be years, it might be a person, it might be types, they seem to do really well on the platform. And knowing a little bit, nostalgia is important right now for a lot of people. It's that looking back on your childhood stuff over the last 8-9 months, when we're all kind of trying to find a little bit of connection to something that makes everybody happy. That's done well too. Like looking back on the '80s, me having grown up in the '80s and '90s, like I kind of missed the Pokemon wave a little bit. I wasn't necessarily super into Pokemon, but I remembered a lot from a kid. But I was already like 18 by the time that really kicked off. So I was thinking about like other stuff at that point. But that's something that people that were 14 or 13 at the time, and 1999, when Pokemon really came out, the card game came out, they always knew that was going to be expensive at some point. They always knew that, in the last like 5-6 years, they realized like, I wish I still had those cards. They're probably worth something now. And sure enough, like, first edition Pokemon are up 500% this year, which makes absolutely no sense to somebody who doesn't think about that as an asset class. But it's outperformed Bitcoin, which is very much a very tough thing to say this year. So when people that are focused on those years, or that understand something from a nostalgia standpoint, or let themselves diversify once they get on the platform, tend to do really, really well on Rally.
So I read that you recently closed on $17 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, in September we closed that round of funding for the company.
Congratulations. And where does that go? Like, how do you think about deploying that cash, and what are the goals for the business in the next 36 months?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that the way we've always looked at money is that, and this is the way I've tried to look at money more, is that, money's an input, not an output. And now that means that we've sold a chunk of the company. So what it means all in is that, we have bosses, like it's our company, but at the same time, there's a fiduciary responsibility to get people paid back on their investment. And there's a fiduciary responsibility that goes with scaling this company. So when we think about the next 18 months, or the next, we always think about things in the short term, sort of the key results that we want to see over the next quarter. And then we start thinking a year and 2 years out. So for us, we look at companies like StockX, and we look at companies like Robinhood, and some of the people that paved the way in terms of sort of democratizing an asset class, or letting younger investors understand what an equity investment is. And I think we're at that point in the business where it is either become the household name, become the leader in this alternative asset space, or it's like figure out a niche that we're going to always keep sort of replicating what we do right now over and over and over again until it gets to scale. But that money means that we have to move quick too. It means that, expanding from the couple 100,000 users that we have right now and getting to millions of users, and being in a situation where it doesn't necessarily require us to explain what we do before someone gets it. So right now, when someone says to me, like, how do I invest in Bitcoin? How do I buy Bitcoin? The first thing I say is, like, download Coinbase. If you go into the app, you'll be able to buy and sell really quickly, and it'll explain everything. I think for the next, 18 months for us, it's adding scale, which isn't just people, but it's different places, and it's going international, and it's sort of taking the business that we have right now and making it way more continuous, where instead of doing one initial offering a day, we're doing multiple, and there's a continuous secondary market to trade inside of that. And all of that has that the legal bills that come with it. It's got the people bills and the resources that come with it, but it's got that time, focus, and attention too, where the individual units of the company right now have to scale up, add more people, and add more scale quickly. So that's what this money is. This money is more so, it's not money that goes in our pockets. It's fuel to scale that business and get to a point that when somebody says, how do I invest in a piece of art, or how do I invest in a baseball card, or how do I invest in a classic car? The first thing someone says is go to Rally. And we feel like that's the macro trend right now, is alternative asset investing that we want to be ahead of.
Yeah, absolutely. I also read that one of your growth strategies is partnerships with brands. Is that accurate to say? And how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think that the way we've always thought about those partnerships is that we want to sort of bring people who share the same ethos with us and share the same vision into the fold. And we want to do that more effectively. When we started the business, we had to buy every asset. So if we wanted to sort of put, if we wanted to put like a Warhol on the platform, that means go out, find a Warhol and buy it at retail, which isn't necessarily the best way to always do it. Now we're at a point that when we can sort of see an asset class that we really want to work within, and that might be like dinosaurs, for example. Instead of us necessarily having to go to auction and buy a dinosaur fossil, we'd rather go upstream and work with the team that we work with right now, which has a quarry in Wyoming and another one in North Dakota, where we can go out on the dig site and bring our investors with us and do some great footage and content that goes with it, and fund the project that these really incredible paleontologists and sort of archaeologists want to work on, but also be able to bring that stuff when it's done instead of having to figure out a place to put it. That means, like, it's in our museum space somewhere. It's in a pop-up, or we're working with the Natural History Museum to have something in a space where anyone could come in and see something incredible and hear the story, and then also leave with a piece of it. So that's how we've always looked at the partnerships that we do. The first couple that we've done, like we work with Topps on a deal to bring something brand new that Topps was making specifically for our investors, where it was a really small batch offering for some of their really unique cards at the start of the baseball season. Long-term for us, working with museums and institutions to sort of, make something very tangible. We can go to a museum, see a piece, scan a QR code, buy a piece of it, and leave owning equity in something that just really brought emotion to you or created a connection, is the long-term partnership goal for us. Because that's the one that benefits all sides, where we can really make something shareable and create community around it, but also do it without having you or anyone else have to come into the Rally app to be a part of it.
Love that. So switching gears to like a more art-centric conversation, do you see a world where individual artists will be selling fractional ownership of their inventory in the future? Or do you think that this model only applies to proven, more, let's call it, stable art asset classes like Warhols? Like, do you see a world where the individual artists will be able to fractionalize their paintings and finance themselves in unique and interesting ways? Is Rally going to be a part of that future, or is that a pipe dream?
No, I mean, that's where we're headed. We look at everything in the world as investable, and we truly mean that. And there's, how this is, like, it's art is so subjective. It's hard to say that something's bad art or good art. Like, it's just anything that creates that emotion, that has that polarization, to me, is truly art. So when I look at, like, and we discussed this a little bit, like we talk about this on Clubhouse and a couple other places, where it's like, we were looked at, it was the banality of the collectible universe. It was this thing where it was like purists hated what we do in the beginning. A lot of them still do. But the problem is that they've been part of a system that's existed for so long, and it's worked for a long time, because there was no means to communicate with what they looked at as a small group. They wanted to go for the big pie. But now you have so many artists, and, like, CJ Henry is a good example of it, but not necessarily the best one. The people that look at it do it best. Some of them are in music right now. They're in other spaces because they want to be able to connect directly with fans or with the enthusiasts and the people that care most. And the way I see what we do, and the way I see where art is going, is that if you're creating something and it's evoking emotion from a small group, they're so much more willing now to connect with you and communicate with you and spend money on your work than they ever had been before. And all of this, the way value was created is from those stories to me. And we've done that successfully on Rally where, you know, we have like a Honus Wagner baseball card, which is one of the most valuable collectibles of all time. And it's something that most people don't know who Honus Wagner is. It's an important card because of the story that goes with it. We were able to tell that story effectively and get people to liberate, you know, $100 at a time to fill up a $600,000 investment. It's hard for me to believe that art doesn't go in this direction where the individual creator owns their work and owns that process start to finish. And all you need now is a method of communicating that to your core group. And then that core group wants to tell people they were the first ones in. There's no better way to do that in my mind than fractionalizing the work, especially if you as an artist, you know the value of your work. If you just say something's worth $100,000 or $1, whatever you say is true. All it takes is that small group, which now you have the means of communicating with, to put a small amount of money in and kind of put their stamp of approval on it. And that snowballs really, really quickly. I can't see a world in the future where a gallery is the only place to go and buy art, or an auction is the only place to go and buy art that's in the six figures. It's just, it's impossible to not see where the future is going, knowing that it's happening in every other space right now so actively.
Yeah, well said. I want to remind folks in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We'll probably cruise for like 5 more minutes and then see if there's any questions, and keep going. So dream projects. We like to talk about dream projects on here. What's like your dream project? What's the dream asset for the platform?
I want to do what you do, man. I want to be able to create and like make stuff that gets people excited. Like that's all I want to do all day is wake up and come. I want to wake up and draw all day. If I really could do it. That's like my actual dream. But when I think about,
why aren't you doing that then?
Honestly, like I do it. I still do it, but it's also like the way I look at what we do is I like making people happy. Like that, I really do love when people get excited about the stuff that I'm doing or we're doing as a business. And every time we launch a new asset class or we come up with like a new way to sort of communicate what we're doing, whether it's a dinosaur or music or anything, that to me, like when people get excited about it is why when I want to keep going and making new stuff and doing new things and creating more. So I look at music as the space that we're going into. It's something that I have a history in, but it's also like in terms of a dream project to be able to bring an artist who maybe is like on SoundCloud or maybe has a small following, but a super engaged following and doesn't necessarily want to go with the label construct that doesn't necessarily benefit them. They don't need the machine. They want to remain independent. To be able to take somebody like that, have them be able to put a value on what their tour looks like, or what their merch line looks like, or what their contract looks like, and let their fans be the first people to put money in and make that something all inclusive that comes with the tour and comes with the album points and comes with the streams and everybody's really a part of that process, to me is like the next frontier for us. And that's kind of like what the dream project looks like. And we're starting to have those conversations now with some very meaningful artists that hopefully we'll have some more info on soon. But that to me is like a way to really bring community together where everybody can benefit from it. And it's this living, breathing asset that has cash flow, but also has, you know, a real connection with people. That's kind of where I see this going.
Awesome. You familiar with Masterworks and Nifty Gateway and these other platforms? What are your thoughts on NFTs and how does that overlap with your business, if at all?
Yeah, so we've talked with like Justin Blau and a few people that have done it like at a level that feels like it's real. You know what I mean? Like the problem is that in my mind, when I see what's happening in the NFT space right now, is that early on when something's brand new and people see a little bit of success, you have those bad actors that come in and they're in it for a cash grab a little bit. And you start seeing bad projects and it gives a bad name to everything. And that happened early on with crypto, with all the ICOs that came out in 2017, when people were trying to raise $40 million for a project that wasn't done or art that wasn't complete. And then you saw it a little bit when we first launched, and Masterworks came out right after us and a few others. And there were 3 or 4 that were just working in very bad faith, and those went away. I think that with NFTs, it's hard. It's still hard for me to see a giant swath of the public, especially creators who aren't necessarily like, if I'm working all day and I'm trying to create all day and it's not something that's directly connected to the internet, it's hard for me to understand what an NFT is start to finish. And that intimidation factor is tough. So that's, I think, the reason that you're seeing like digital art and crypto art in its infancy now. A lot of people are excited about it, but the prices haven't necessarily hit that 7-figure mark, which I do think they will quickly, is because of that disconnect between a regular person understanding what it is versus like a crypto bro understanding what it is, which is very different right now. But this is like the most exciting time for that. There's so much happening in that space, connecting music, art, finance, all these things. It's hard to imagine a world in 2 or 3 years where that's not a very real, very meaningful piece of the landscape.
Jordan of the community asks, is there like a minimum value or equity that has to be associated with a collectible for it to be viable for your platform?
No, I mean we've done like IPOs of $6,000 and $7,000 items that were just really rare, very one of one. We've done up to $1 million items. I think that a lot of it comes with a couple of things. When we source assets, we always think about the rarity. We have the provenance that goes with it, why it's meaningful and impactful. But just as much in terms of like all those tangible check marks, we think about how socially relevant it is and if it's going to be relevant for the foreseeable future. So we'd rather have something that is a one of one, that might be a little bit esoteric, and it might be something like, the first iPhone still in the plastic. And the thought is like that probably only appeals to people who are in like the Apple cult. But if we find a great version of it, we can tell a great story around it. We know that's always going to be relevant because there's always going to be an iPhone cycle coming out. Apple's always going to be in the news. It's something that everybody's going to pay attention to. If we can kind of piggyback that to tell the story a little bit, and it's only a $6,000 or $7,000 item, but it has meaning and is investment worthy, there's no reason we wouldn't do it. And then we always sort of, we have share prices that start at $1 to make sure that it fits everybody's appetite. So there's never a situation where someone sees an item like that, whether it's $1 million item or a $7,000 item, and can't make an investment that they're comfortable with.
And you don't need to be an accredited investor to make an investment in one of your assets.
No, the only stipulation is that 10%, you can't invest more than 10% of your net worth into any one item. And you can't, during the initial offering phase, you can't invest more than 10% of the total value. But other than that, there's no minimums, there's no accreditation needed.
Wow. So I'm going to help you solve your wish, which is I'm going to invite you to our figure drawing and still life drawing workshops that happen on Zoom. So you can draw with us.
I'm 100% in. It's tough. It's weird, man. Cause like sometimes I'm stuck in this world where it's like, I'm sure you have it too. Everybody's so full of self-doubt, and I haven't really drawn or gone back to like, I used to be really into like, into charcoal, and I was super into line drawing, and that comes from like 80s and 90s. My whole life was like trying to recreate Roy Lichtenstein drawings, you know what I mean? And I translated into graphic design really quickly and got out of that. But I'm like dying to get back to a point that I have like a pen in my hand with a bunch of artists just drawing. Like I'm dying to get back to it. So I appreciate it, man. I'll definitely be there.
Yeah, you found it. We do it a couple times a week, especially starting in the new year. I'm just super fascinated with your platform. I'm kind of like attempting to jump the line and figure out how to get like a monolith or something listed with you guys. I recognize that my career and the artists that are in the community don't have the provenance just yet to be on your platform, but I definitely see a world wherein there's perhaps a collaboration to be had between Rally and the TMFA community.
No, absolutely, no question. I think that it's we want to make sure that people know like finance is this weird world where a lot of times it's this zero sum game, and it's make money by any means and everything has to be worth millions of dollars. But we really do, the long-term goal of this platform is hopefully to bring together, the true creators with the people who love what they do, whether it's one person or two people or 100 people, and this big group that we put together that trusts what we curate. So it's not something that necessarily is thinking about like a well-known name for us is not the be all end all. It's something that has a true relevance, is investment worthy to a group, or we can bring a group together and curate something that is investment worthy. So there's no question that's not off the table by any means.
Fantastic. Well, we've had you for 30 minutes and I'm really grateful for your time. I'm going to just briefly kind of scan the room and see if anyone on the community call has any questions, or if you have anything else you'd like to say that we didn't cover yet. I really appreciate you being here, and I've checked out the platform and I'm for sure going to invest in some stuff. I just got to figure out what it is. Probably.
I appreciate it, dude. No, I mean, it's likewise, dude. I'm a fan, man. I told you, like, there's very few people that are able to sort of, do something they love like this, make money with it, and not sell out. Like the idea of like the sellout thing is just such a prevalent thing in the art community. It's something that like my closest friends who are true artists, like they look at themselves as real working artists. They've always looked at me as like this sellout who went and did design and made an app, and that's always been like the worst thing. to be able to do what you love every day, man, and be able to create something great, get people excited about it, you're living the dream. I'm trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, selling out isn't so bad though, especially if it pays the bills, right?
You've said it before too. Like, there's nothing wrong with making money. That's like a weird thing that when I was younger, at least we're around the same age, but like when we were younger, it was the idea that like if you're making art and commercializing it, it's showing up at like Pacific Sunwear on a t-shirt, you've sold out. And that's like the end, that's the end of the world. But everybody got away from that now. And it's not, that question doesn't necessarily need to be asked. But early on when we made this app, the platform was based around like finance, but you got to ask yourself, like, do I want to be super rich or do I want to build something? Because they aren't the same thing. If you're building something great, you're doing awesome stuff and able to make money on it and able to commercialize it, there's no reason not to do that. And that whole tide has turned too. Everybody realized that there's a business to be made with art in particular. There's no reason not to think about it as a business, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we have you here. We value your opinion. Gang, any questions for Rob before we let him go and say thank you very much for being here? Okay.
I'm a little bit still confused on what you do. So like you like buy something and people invest in it?
Yeah, I'm confused sometimes too. There's nothing wrong with that. So what we do is that we take sort of like think about like a Warhol, and then you think about like this $4 million reversal or painting or whatever it is. We take that, and instead of sort of selling it to one person, what we've done is we find the best quality version. We'll partner with the gallery, with whoever the owner is, and we'll turn into like a small company basically that has a bunch of shares. So the same way you invest in like Apple, it's a ticker symbol of Apple that represents the company. You're investing in shares of that asset, of that actual Warhol. It sits on our platform. We'll lease it out to a museum. We'll try and create a revenue stream around it. As the value of that increases, you can sell your shares on our platform, all through like registered broker dealers inside the app, and make money on the appreciation of that art. So we do that we haven't jumped all the way into actual fine art yet, but we do that with everything, all these collectibles that have, gone up in value crazy over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. And we do that at a price that's affordable to you. So you can buy, 1/100th of the actual piece. And if the value of the whole piece goes up, you can sell it on our platform the same way you buy or sell stock.
And then how do you make money?
As a company, so we do a couple of things. We have a sourcing fee that typically goes towards the seller, where anywhere between 2 to 10 and sometimes a little bit more percent on that initial offering phase. But then for us too, like we really are trying to build a community out right now. So we do a bunch of things inside of our museum space in New York where we'll have, we'll rent out the space, and that's like one revenue stream. We have merch that goes along with everything we do, the same way any artist would, or the same way any sort of musician would, that pays a bunch of the bills for us too. But we're this privately funded company that's really based on building the community out right now. I think that with around 250 individual assets on the platform that trade right now in some capacity, we're really focused on building out the community and making money sort of for our users, or earning them some money before we kind of ask them for money. So the next step for us, and part of the expansion of the platform, is building out that premium tier that'll have like special types of investment and early access to investments, some of the gallery tours and the extra stuff that comes with it, which will be part of the revenue strategy. But for right now, it's really about, a little bit of that sourcing fee where we make money as a business on a lot of these, $1 million items. It kind of adds up over time, but more so building out that community so that we're in a position to create that subscription or create that product that generates revenue long-term for the business when we get to scale.
Sean, did you want to ask your question?
Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, a couple questions. So you're kind of building these kind of very kind of esoteric, like little communities based around interesting verticals. Do you tap into existing communities that exist kind of out there? And if so, how do you find those communities? Or do you come up with do you just go find fancy car, dinosaur egg, whatever that item is, and somehow that tracks out into that unit? Like, how do you get those kind of niche groups to come find you?
Yeah, so I mean, we have no marketing function at the company. So we initially intended, we're starting to put it together now. We initially intended to sort of do this in a way that, went after those groups, and whether it be something as basic as on Reddit, or if we're doing the social listening, trying to find out and show up in those groups within text or within, conversation, throw a mailing list, stuff like that. That's how we always looked at the way it would work. But what's happened is that those groups have formed around us. So I don't want to say we got lucky, because we kind of created that a little bit, but the assets that we were bringing to market had always created the mini groups around them. So like subreddits would pop up around Rally and an asset, and that would be sort of based around like a specific baseball card. Or we would show up in Discord groups somewhere else, and we'd go in and have the conversation and do what we can to sort of curate as best we can without forcing or pushing anybody towards an investment. But those communities have popped up around us individually, and we've always been, from like a customer service standpoint, we've always been super, super transparent about what we do as a business, what the assets and the items that we're targeting, what we bring to the platform. And we almost have like moderators within the community right now. A lot of them started on Twitter more than anything else. Twitter has been really, really good to us in that we have people that are doing the research on our behalf now. There's a bunch of like little ratings agencies that have popped up. And then when we do sort of an asset class or a new asset, they'll do a full report on it and they'll push it out to their community. And we've been able to sort of leverage that by being a part of the conversation, but not dictating the conversation or curating the conversation. So those little mini niche groups have popped up with the individual verticals in a way out of our control. We've done our best to make sure that that group is motivated and sees more and that we're always in contact with them. But that's kind of sprung up almost like as a result of the assets, as opposed to us finding the group first and pointing them towards an asset.
Okay, so it's asset first and group follow.
Yeah, group tends to follow, and it also breaks out in a way that like our vintage literature group, we have like a Slack channel that we moderate as best we can too, where it's like, a few hundred of sort of the VIPs, the people that were early to the platform that are the most engaged. And like the literature group is very, very, they're way more engaged than like the wine group is right now. So we're starting to see, as this develops out, certain asset classes that are a little bit, that have like a little bit more closed door entry, and wine is one of those. It kind of has a lot of familiarity and similarities to the art world, is one where that group is way more quiet. They show up on days to invest, but they're not as vocal as the vintage literature group or the baseball card, especially right now. Like we're in this renaissance for sports cards and collectibles in the sports world right now. And those groups find us before we ever have to find them, led by the assets.
Question. So one of the things, I lost him. One of the things I'm a little confused about. So the asset gets what's the terminology? We're fractionalized. Is the asset ever sold then to generate an exit or a profit for the people who invested? Or if someone wants to come in and purchase that, they have to buy all the shareholders out and bid it up?
Yeah, so what we do is that we're always sort of tracking what's happening in the space outside of just our app. So there's a secondary market in the app through registered broker dealers where you can sell your shares and put them on the open market using the bid-ask metric. And it's a super engaged secondary market. It's a pretty volume heavy secondary market right now. And we're always sort of surfacing information on what could potentially affect price, whether it's auction results or insurance values or new displays or gallery openings, all the things that come with it. But we're also always trying to find the best quality versions of any of these assets. So when we buy, a vintage 1955 Porsche, we're buying the one that has the least miles, all the original paint, has all the specs that a real collector would want. So in the event that somebody wants to buy the best version, it's always on display and always for sale inside of our app. So we've gone through about a dozen individual exits right now, some of our highest value assets. And that's based on the fact that we have, in many cases, the best quality version. When that happens, we do a survey site, like kind of a vote that goes to our individual shareholders. So everything is share weighted. If you own 10 shares, it's the equivalent of 10 votes, let's say. We give them the price, what the payout looks like, what the after taxes payout might look like. So you see the net, and then we let them sort of cast their vote, yes or no, on the sale. That vote then goes to our third-party advisory board to approve the sale. The money is typically already qualified in escrow at that point. So that whole exit process is something that we're trying to make as simple as possible too, which has been a big hurdle to try and find the best quality version, even for people with money or with access. So we try and get that done in like a 6-day window. We have two going on right now that were both approved at I think it was 83% and a 79% approval from investors. So those are going to our advisory board and they're getting sold. One was
what's the cutoff? Is it 50% or 66%?
Yeah, anything over 50 is something that goes to the third-party advisory board for the final proxy vote.
Interesting. And is that the expectation of most of the people who invest, is that there's this liquidity exit event, or that there's some sort of trade in a secondary market, or they just want to be part of that car and they're willing to and who gets to keep the car? Like where does it sit?
So it's a little bit of all three. Those are good. I'll start with the last question. So we have a couple of warehouses and storage facilities here on the East Coast that are 24-hour concierge and temperature controlled and well maintained, and we do it at scale. So the insurance, the maintenance costs, everything is near zero, is very low for us. But we also sort of have like our museum space in Soho, and we got a bunch of pop-ups that we kind of created. 2020 for us is going to be a big community year. Obviously, that's kind of slowed a little bit. 2021 will be the same way. So the idea that a car could be leased out to a hotel, let's say, and put it in the lobby and have that be something that becomes a dividend payment to investors is on the roadmap right now as well.
Oh, that's really smart.
Yeah, so we're trying to always make sure that a big goal for us was and will continue to be to create cash flow from these stagnant assets, which is something very unique that we've had on a roadmap for a while that kind of got shut down a little bit this year. But we also, in that space in Soho that Matty walked into, it's something that we always had, like the new assets, the IPOs, open to public, so you can walk in, have the conversation with one of our sort of professionals in the store. They'll tell you the whole history, the story about it, everything we do as a platform. That's always been our goal, is that so much of this stuff does, and art in particular, gets tucked away in free ports and people never really see it. It's a tax haven more than anything else. We want to bring that stuff out so that A, everyone can get access to it, but B, to your point with exits, it's a way to showcase what we have in a way that a lot of people didn't expect. So we put our store on Lafayette Street, and it's between, it's around the block from Louis Vuitton, it's 2 blocks from Chanel. It's in a place where people that are there with money to spend and that understand sort of like, the luxury goods market are seeing the same stuff and potentially providing those exits. We've had 2 of those sell from initial conversations that started in that store with the asset. So that's like one of the exits for sure. And that's something that people think about. But we're seeing that a lot of our investors, they're becoming really savvy alternative asset investors, where they look at these as medium to long-term investments, the same way that anybody who was investing in art might look at it. They're not looking at it as quick flips. And we've always tried to avoid that too. That's not something that we don't want to turn this platform into like a gambling platform. And that tends to happen when you have the idea that something can go up 100% the next day. Some of this stuff moves dramatically. And, Pokemon is a good example. The set that we have that had an exit opportunity at a 100% game, our investors saw long-term potential in it and they vetoed that sale. And now since then it's up 500%. So they were right. I think they look at this as something that they want to have access to the things that they care about. We talk about our investments as passion-led, but the idea is that passion leads you to an investment thesis, which leads you to returns in the medium to long term. That's the way a lot of our investors have been looking at it. So they'll kind of dip their toe into the secondary market and maybe sell 1 or 2 shares to see how it works. But for the most part, we see investors who are really creating well-diversified portfolios. And when exits happen, a lot of times they're happy to take it, but it's not necessarily part of their immediate thesis of a quick flip.
And do you have inside, because you have all of these like kind of very specific, very, very specific verticals, where do you have team members on your team that know that know classic cars or that know baseball cards, or is it really community driven, or do you have someone within in your team that kind of can really, because to hunt these assets out has to be particularly challenging, no?
Yeah, but I mean, it's definitely is. In the beginning, to what I was kind of saying earlier, is that we had to go out and buy stuff, and we had to, it was an 18-month process to find the first 3 assets that were on the platform. Now we're at a point that we keep some of the best people around us, and we do it in a way where a lot of them are advisors to the company or equity owners or investors, and they're big auction houses. They're a lot of the big curators. A lot of them are overseas, and they've been doing this from generations, especially when it comes to things like books and wine. So, as for sourcing, we only work with the groups or individuals with significant domain expertise. And that's, whenever possible, we want to bring them in-house and work with us exclusively. So the network includes full-time staff who've worked with some of the biggest auction houses in the world, most of them. Again, the advisors who we've developed a really long-standing relationship with, well-known collectors who really present us with deals that meet or sort of exceed checklists more than anything else, that internal checklist that we have. But what we've seen is that a lot of these people don't necessarily want to go the auction route, especially for the $1 million to $2 million things or the $3 or $4 million things. Sometimes for a $20 million item, it makes more sense to go with the Sotheby's. But you're also going to take a 25% hit one way or the other. There's going to be a sourcing fee that goes with that's way higher than ours. There's going to be lockup periods where you can't go to another auction house or sell it privately for a year after, even if it doesn't sell. There's a situation where they want to pull reserves off, they'll push you in a direction. So for getting liquidity for an owner, we've made a system, we put a system in place that's way quicker, way easier, and you get to keep more of your money as an owner of the item before it goes to the platform. And we do that in a way that has all these sort of experts along the way that are specific to asset verticals to give it the check mark before it gets to us.
And what's the share, like on $1 million item, like how do you decide how many shares per that $1 million item? Is it based on demand, or is it like, oh, shares are $1, or is it like, what's the how do you determine that?
Yeah, so that changes. That depends on the item more than anything else. So a lot of times what we'll do is we want to make sure that it's accessible to everybody and that it's a price point that isn't intimidating, that everybody can kind of step into. So if we had $1 million item and it was something that was, very esoteric, and it was something that was going to require a lot of conversation, and there were going to be some big buyers who were very specific to that item, doing a $50 share price and breaking it up in less shares might be the most meaningful way to do that. But if we do something that's based around, a lot of people on our platform invest in like legendary moments or legendary names. So if we were doing, a Warhol, or we were doing, anything we do that's Michael Jordan related or Kobe Bryant. When we did The Great Gatsby, which is something that everybody recognizes and understands, the first edition, or Harry Potter, that's something that we always want to make sure is a price point that a new investor or somebody who really would come in specifically for that asset can have access to. So we'll try and create the most shares that we possibly can around that asset. We have a limit to a certain degree with the SEC qualification and with the specific regulatory construct that we use that prevents us from just making 1 million shares. There's only supposed to be X amount of shareholders or X amount of shares in any particular asset. So it'll never be a situation where there's 1 million shares of $1 million item, but it can easily be a situation where it's a $15 or $20 share, especially for something that's going to attract or gonna be the first lane in for a brand new investor. We want to make sure it's a price point that's affordable. So we always try and keep it under $100 relative to the amount of shares available.
Cool. Awesome. Sorry, I get stuck in these things. I start rambling and asking.
I mean, listen, they're great. Those are great questions. This is something that, like, I know this community is very much driven by creators too, and that's something that, a lot of times we'll talk to like a finance crowd and we're talking in like finance language, but this is something that is a community that's way closer to the way I actually speak on a day-to-day basis. So I'd much rather have the conversation here than anywhere else. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, thank you for kind of breaking it down for us. I'm learning a ton, and I know that this is something that we're all going to be paying attention to as the world kind of works itself out and the future of art is revealed to us. Is there anything our community can do for you? I've downloaded the app. I'm going to invest. Like, what can we do for you since you've spent now 50 minutes kind of educating us and teaching us stuff?
No, I mean, honestly, we're a platform, and I'm a person that loves feedback. If there's something that we're missing, creators see around corners in a way that I think a lot of people that are in the technology business don't. I think tech wants to pat themselves in the back a lot of times, that the people who are really more, not necessarily on the product side like me, but on the finance side or on the investing side, they pride themselves on seeing around corners. But creators run the world. If there's something that we should be doing or a space we should be going into or feedback on what we're doing right now, that's something that I personally always want to hear. And this is a community that I feel like has that insight that a lot of people we talk to on a daily basis do not. So any feedback, any artists, any pieces, any collectibles that you want to see on this platform is something that we take, and I take very personally and very to heart. And we want to make sure that we give people access to the things they care about. So any feedback on where we should be going, directions we should be headed as a platform, that's something money can't buy. So any of that feedback I'm always open to and would love to hear from this community.
Awesome. So we're going to give you an honorary membership for the community. So I'll be sending you an email to sign you up. We've got this cool like dashboard that is going on, and calendar of all of our events and stuff like that, and a kind of a knowledge base around being a creator and an artist. What's the best way for the community to stay in touch with you? I reached out via Twitter. Is there a better way to get in touch with you if they do have feedback?
No, on Twitter, on Instagram, it's Rob Petrozzo on everything, and then at Rally on every platform for the business. But there's more often than not, I'm a little bit of a control freak with all the social media channels, so it's typically me, even on the company social media channels, still to this point.
Awesome. I'm gonna stop the recording, but I just wanted to I'll just